Welcome to episode 12 of the Aluminium Podcast, Apple News with a British accent. Every week I'm joined by a different guest from the world of tech and beyond, bringing you the latest Apple and wider technology news, as well as insight into our guests and their stories. And for our 12th episode, I'm delighted to welcome From Team Kinetix, Ninja Warrior Brad Wendes. Have I actually said your name right? I don't even know.
It's a weird one, so it's Brad Wendes.
Wendes. Oh, I wasn't far off.
You were close, yeah.
Dyslexia strikes again. How are you, Brad?
I'm good, thank you. And you know what? I'm absolutely delighted to be on the show because there have been some great people on the show, and I'm like, wow, this kind of puts me on a level with John Prosser. I'll take that. I'll take that as a win.
Absolutely, and I think next stop is Genius Bar for you. So we'll get that in the diary next.
Yeah, I mean, I look like Sam Cole. I could replace Sam, no problem. Easy.
Yeah. Just you need the glasses. I've got some clear ones here somewhere.
Brilliant.
Yeah, perfect. Good to have you here, mate. As you know, we always start with some this or that questions. Feel free to go in a third direction if you want. I keep explaining it at the beginning of every podcast. I'm guessing the people that are listening have kind of got used to it by now. But there's a lot of guests that it surprises. So let's get into it. Xbox or PlayStation?
Well, that's a tough one. So we've got an Xbox and a PlayStation at home, neither of which are plugged in. So I would say I'm a Nintendo boy. We're a similar age. We grew up with like NES, Super NES. I actually had a Mega Drive, but I desired a SNES.
Yeah, I was a Sega kid too.
Yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog was just faster. It was a more powerful system, but it arguably didn't have the software support. So I kind of want a Switch, but since I don't play the PlayStation or the Xbox, it seems like a waste of money.
I don't know. I'm going to come out and say Sonic is a better game than Mario. Come at me in the comments. I know you will. I know you will, people. But yeah, Sonic, far superior game to Mario.
Okay.
Just putting it out there. I have got like a classic Game Boy, like the OG, up here somewhere, which we were given by a photographer. Like during lockdown, he was clearing out all of his old tech, and I got a cinema display, which I've just managed to get a power supply for, and all sorts of stuff from him. But that was one of the things, and it's got like 3 games with it, I think. So there's Tetris, like a Formula 1 game that's horrendous, like a Ferrari one, and the third one I can't remember because I was just never that into Nintendo, but Tetris is always going to be an OG, like, god-level game.
Well, I've got a classic NES, like the old Nintendo System grey box.
Wow.
And I tried to play Duck Hunt on a modern television, and it doesn't work because they don't reflect.
No, it needs a CRT, doesn't it?
So you have to put a sheet of glass in front of your TV to play Duck Hunt, which just seems like extra steps.
Wow. I mean, it is an extra step. It's getting a sheet of glass and putting it in front of your TV, I guess.
Or you could stand in the garden, I guess, and play through the window. That might work.
Oh, yeah. That's more convenient, probably. Cool. Next one, Windows or Mac?
Well,
I feel like this is an easy one for most of my guests.
Well, yeah. So I'm doing this on a 14-inch MacBook Pro, and
Show off.
I'm recording this. Yeah, and I'm recording this on continuity camera on an iPhone 15 Pro. So I am a Mac person now, but I haven't always been.
Okay.
So I dabbled. I got my first Mac, which was the polycarbonate MacBook Black back in 2006, possibly.
It was the black one, was it?
Yeah, I loved that.
Yeah, I've still got one.
Absolutely loved it. And that was my first experience with like the care and the aftercare for Apple because the battery died. You know, it had a removable battery, and it had a little bug in the firmware apparently where if it went to 0% and turned itself off, if you didn't charge it quite quickly, it would still degrade a little bit, and you'd end up with minus 1% battery, and it would just not read the battery and think it had a flaw. I phoned Apple. They couriered a battery to me. It was there the next day, and they just did a straight swap. And I was like, that's amazing. And even back in sort of 2007, 2008, that was amazing. So that kind of sold me on Apple. I wanted it because I wanted to make video and I wanted to do more creation. I had a background in desktop publishing. And unusually, my school had Macs. So when I was at high school, we had a Mac suite, which was in the technology department for the CNC machines. So I was like, I had a lot of Mac experience. We had a suite of the old like Project 91, the ones that you've got. Which no one wanted to use because they were horrendous in 1995 and 1994. But we still had them, so I was used to using single button, used to using Mac OS. So I was old school Mac, but it was when I had a couple of MacBook Pros as well. So I went from the last one I had was a late 14 MacBook Pro, which I loved that machine. It was a 15-inch MacBook Pro. I did all my video editing on it. It was lightning fast for what it was. Could even game on it a little bit. We played CSGO, played what else would we play? Oh, there's a few like first-person shooters and things from Steam that you could play on it. Really great machine. And then they brought out the touch bar version, and I was looking at the reviews thinking, oh, it doesn't look like a worthy upgrade. And, I'm going to keep what I've got. And as that slowed down, I actually jumped over to Windows. I got a Surface Book. Yeah, I know. Which was the worst purchase I've ever made. And I should have known from the moment I bought it, even the experience. You go into an Apple shop, an Apple store, and you know what you're getting. There's a lovely experience. There's people around it. I went into like a Curry's PC World to buy this Microsoft thing, and it was like $2,000. And I'm sat there and I've bought this thing, and it only had 8 gig of RAM, which my MacBook had 16. Had a terabyte of hard disk space, and the screen was all right, and it had a detachable screen, which I thought might be cool, and it had a pencil and a touch screen, which I never used. In fact, I just forever looking for that pencil. But the experience in the shop was terrible. That I'd bought this thing, and I said, oh, actually, I've got quite a lot of accessories. Can I have a bag? And being Curry's, they said, no, you have to pay 50p for a plastic bag. I'm like, I've just spent $2,000 on a laptop. Okay, I'll pay 50p. He's like, oh, you have to go queue up at the front again. And there was a big queue of people at the till. I'm like, I've just spent $2,000 on a laptop, and you won't just go and get me a bag. I'll give you the 50p. Can I just have a bag so I can go home? And I had to queue up and buy a bag. I was like, this wouldn't happen in an Apple store. That's not the experience you get. So, and the machine was okay. I used Premiere Pro, I used Photoshop. It was all right, but I did miss the MacBook. But I didn't like any of the touch bar models. And I remember having a disagreement with a tech friend who lives in San Francisco who was saying the touch bar is going to revolutionize laptop technology. It's going to be the next big thing. I was like, I don't see when there's software support, maybe, but I don't see it at the moment. And it looks like I was kind of right. Some people love it, but I just don't think it was ever really supported properly. And the butterfly keyboards weren't great is probably an understatement.
No, I was on the brink of getting one of those touch bar ones as like a work laptop while I was working for one of the drinks distributors. And in retrospect, I'm kind of glad that we didn't go that way. I ended up just using my own stuff and ignoring my actual work laptop, which I've done on a number of occasions.
Without jumping onto your next question, but when Apple Silicon came out, I was like, right, I need this. This is Even my non-tech friends were talking about it. I was like, okay, so now it's time for an upgrade. I actually bought a Dell XPS 15, which people compare with the MacBook. I bought a brand new one. It was awful. The experience as a brand new laptop from Dell, I would get blue screen every time I shut down Windows, without fail. Every single time with blue screen.
Nice.
Everything was updated, but I'd get software conflicts, hardware conflicts. I didn't change anything on it. It just didn't work like expect it to. It was quite powerful, and then I had that laptop for longer than I wanted to because I wanted the 14-inch MacBook. And there was this weird little guy on the internet called John Prosser who said they were coming out in the spring. So I was like, well, I'll just get one now. And he didn't, or it didn't, and it cost him his eyebrows. So I hung on to that XPS for a little bit longer. I sold it for a reasonable amount of money, but I lost quite a lot on that, and then got the 14-inch. And I am that Mac. Unless they do something stupid, I am back on the Mac and I'm not leaving.
Yeah, and I mean, that was one of the big things with the Mac, obviously, because Apple makes the software and the hardware, and there's a limited number of configurations, even more limited now than they used to be, if you think that they're creating the chips themselves, as opposed to using Intel chips, and previously using socketed Intel chips so that people would be able to swap stuff out. Like, everything is so tightly integrated now that there's almost no possibility of getting hardware conflicts or anything along those lines, because Windows is having to basically create something that will work on whatever pile of hardware gets thrown together by Linus Tech Tips, I guess, or any of those. But I still can't understand why people think that building your own PC is a good thing and it's satisfying when you watch people like Linus do it, who do it daily, pretty much, and still find it the most stressful thing in the world to try and do. Never get it to work first time. How is this a good thing? How is that like the pinnacle that you want to achieve? I don't quite get that. I don't know.
I think the last time I built a PC, I wanted a video editing machine the year before I got that MacBook Black, which was one of the reasons I went for the Mac, because it was a creator machine. And we were up all night putting this thing together. I had to get a video editing card because there wasn't really a proper USB interface. I had to use FireWire, which came out of my little Sony HD tape DV cam. and we were up all night trying to get this damn thing to work, like trying to get the things to fit and then get it to recognize it, and then we had to download a copy of Windows on another machine, put it on a USB to then and yeah, after doing that, I wanted to get it done and working, and it did work, but not very well. I had to have a desk fan on the side of it because it would overheat. So I'm like, yeah, now's time to jump. This little MacBook will do all of the stuff I need it to do, and it did. It really did.
Yeah. No, it's the convenience, and I think these days I just want to get on with doing what I want to do, as opposed to trying to make the machine work so that I can do what I want to do. That's my biggest thing. So yeah, the next question I think we've already covered was Android or iOS. I'm going to say you're probably on the iOS side of the fence.
Well, you say that, but I am quite a new adopter to iOS. Even though I had Macs for years, when smartphones came about, I'm sorry, I'm about to swear on your. I was a BlackBerry user for quite a long time. Even when BlackBerry started to die, I had the BlackBerry Storm, which was the first full touchscreen BlackBerry, because I thought they were going to, be the iPhone killer. Spoiler, they weren't.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Did you have a playbook as well?
No, I mean, they weren't bad devices. Like I do occasionally miss having a physical keyboard, and there were times when that was useful. And I remember at the time saying, well, I'm not sure that touchscreen is going to do everything you need it to do, which I was a bit wrong, a little bit. So when I got my first smartphone, it was the Samsung Galaxy S3, which at the time was the most powerful Android smartphone you could get. It was a great device, and it had things like eye tracking technology, which never worked, and it had like proximity file sharing, which never worked. It was an all right device, and it was my introduction to smartphones. And I then bought into that ecosystem, which is probably why I stuck with Android for so long, because you're in the ecosystem. So I had lots of stuff on the Play Store. I had like books and songs and things purchased through Google. I was a big tinkerer. So I would be downloading nightly betas and even alpha builds of Android, and I'd be putting things on my phone, experimental builds on my daily driver, which is a terrible idea. But I was a big tinkerer, and I wanted to play, and I wanted to do cool stuff. So you could turn it upside down and the screen would still go to where you want it to be. I don't know why that's a useful function, but it was something that I could make it do. And all of the customization and things was really interesting to me as a guy in my 20s. Well, as you get older and you're running a business off of this device, that stuff isn't important anymore. So I ended up moving to, I was using Nexus devices. I don't know if you remember the Google Nexus, which was like they were quite inexpensive, but you could plug them in and download all kinds of wacky firmware.
Precursor to the Pixel, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, and when the Pixel came along, I thought the Pixel was too expensive for what it was, so I didn't want to get a Pixel phone. So I jumped over to the Huawei.
Huawei. Yeah.
Huawei. I had the P30 Pro, P20 Pro, and the P30 Pro, which were very good phones, but not without their flaws. They had some great little features. They had excellent cameras, and they paired with Leica. So being into photography, I was very interested in the kind of cameras they had, and they were fairly good phones. And it was a combination of two things. Huawei, Google wouldn't give them the Play Store anymore, so I would be losing all of my stuff anyway if I stayed with them. I didn't desire a Pixel device. So I'm looking around. I'd had not great experiences with some Samsung phones. I didn't like what Samsung were doing at the time, so I didn't want to jump back into the Galaxy. And this is about the time that I actually discovered your channel, because I just went hardcore tech research. Like, what is a good phone now? What is it? And it was about the time that Apple Silicon was coming around, and it all kind of came into one. So and I just like dived back into the Apple ecosystem with both feet. I'm all on. So I got the iPhone 12 Pro Max and Apple Watch Series 6.
Yep.
And then I got the iPad Pro 11 with the M1 chip in. And then I sat and twiddled my thumbs for a little while until the M1 MacBook Pro came out. So that's everything. I am like massively in the ecosystem. My work phone is an SE. Tash is on an iPhone with an Apple Watch. My little girl's got an iPad mini, which is an old one that she uses for just watching YouTube. Yep. So we are all Apple, and being part of that ecosystem, I can't see me ever jumping out of it. They've got me. I am in the Apple prison, whether I like it or not.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't realise that you hadn't been using iPhones before sort of Apple Silicon time, and I'm impressed to say that maybe I had a little bit of an influence on that, which is good for me.
Yeah.
Apple, I hope you're listening. Bring me over to Cupertino. Let's go to Dub. That would be good fun. But yeah, that's impressive. So yeah, the 12 Pro Max is actually what I started. Well, sort of what took over filming this channel, because originally I thought like all YouTubers that you need a proper camera. So I had the Lumix G7, because that could do like 4K video and all that sort of stuff, and had a proper lens, and the autofocus on it was horrific, which I think was one of the big reasons that I jumped as soon as the 12 Pro Max came out and it had those great sensors. Like, I switched over and everyone said, "Oh, your video looks a lot better." I was like, I'm using a phone now. Like, this isn't what's supposed to happen. Like, I'm supposed to graduate from phone to proper camera, but no, it was much better going the other way. This I'm on the 14 Pro right now, again using the continuity camera, and I can't complain about it. It's just solid, and the autofocus is dramatically better than most cameras. LiDAR, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I'm using the 15 Pro on here, and so I film my in-person podcasts on DSLRs, and the quality is good, but I'm still, fixed at 1080. It's a hell of an edit, but the remote ones, I got an iPhone and a MacBook and an XLR mic. I can do this anywhere. All of this kit fits into a holdall, and I can record anywhere. It's great.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be needing to do that because I'm away again next week with some work stuff, so I might be recording remotely for the next podcast. But again, Riverside, which we both use for recording our podcasts, means that everything gets recorded locally, and then it kind of combines it all in the cloud and does magic, and AI happens. So that's all good as well. So yeah, we've kind of covered your current setup, which is what we'd next come on to. But are you tempted? We've had news this week that Qualcomm, the Snapdragon X Elite, is kind of making waves for being potentially faster in multi-core scores than the M3 by about 21%. Are you thinking maybe you're going to jump back on that Surface bandwagon and grab yourself one of those bad boys?
Absolutely not. I think I would rather dig my eyes out with chopsticks than go back to using Windows. I'm a little bit tempted to get a Windows machine because there are some retro games that I'd like to play. And the issue with that is I'll start looking at machines and I'll be like, oh, but yeah, I should probably get a decent graphics card and I should probably get a better processor. And suddenly you've spec'd it up to $2,000. It's like, I don't want to spend £2,000 on a Windows machine. I want to spend £200 on a Windows machine that I can play retro games on. That's it. That's its entire purpose. No, the Snapdragon stuff is interesting, and it's really interesting to see like the jump from the traditional Intel and the x86 over to ARM. And I think all of us Mac people were looking at what ARM processors could do, and the SoCs that Mac were coming out with, or Apple were coming out with like 4 years ago, and going, this is incredible. Particularly, people say, oh, it's more powerful, or such and such is more powerful. So, well, yeah, your RTX 4090 is more powerful than my chip that I can run for 18 hours without worrying and not getting hot. Yeah. That's
how much of my time? Yeah, how much of my time do I spend gaming? Very little if you're a Mac user, probably. Yeah. On the subject though, where you were talking about potentially getting a PC for doing some older games, like the used iMac 27-inch market, like the fairly recent ones with a 5K display, they're pretty affordable now, and you can boot camp them. So like that might not be a bad choice, because then you still get to use the latest version of macOS as another option on it. It gives you an extra device. I'm currently retrofitting, and actually finally started doing it, a 2012 iMac that I've got, which has still got the 2K display, but that has got Windows running on it. That's also got macOS, I think it's Mountain Lion. So I've gone back to its earliest version, which is kind of fun, kind of retro. Safari won't even run YouTube on it, but with Chrome you can watch YouTube, and it's still a beautiful display, even though it's not the 5K. But you can get those things for almost no money now, like £400-500, and you'd have a 27-inch display that you can also use with universal control from an Apple Silicon Mac and things like that. So not necessarily the worst option.
No, I think you might have just cost me a little bit of money there, Dave, which actually is par for the course with you, because I was doing a lot of tech research, and here's going to massage your ego. I discovered iCave Dave before I discovered John Prosser.
Oh,
Yeah.
don't tell him. Don't
I
tell
was
him.
watching,
We definitely won't clip this.
I was watching Max Tech. I was watching Tailosive Tech. I was watching, like, the algorithm was just pushing iCave Dave at me. And I was like, who's this weird British guy that's just talking about... Because you had maybe 5,000 or 6,000 subscribers at that time, so you're a relatively small channel. And I just kept seeing your face coming up. And I watched a couple of episodes. And a testament to you, Dave, because I watched an episode and you did your, iCave answers. And I was like, oh, I'm going to tap a question in. And like a couple of hours later, I get a notification. Someone's replied to you. It was like, on tomorrow's show. So straight away, I'm like, well, I'm going to watch tomorrow's show. And I watched tomorrow's show, and the next one, and the next one. And then when we were doing daily shows from probably early 21 or late 2020, I was there every single day. And it became one of my favorite YouTube channels simply because of that community side of things. I know you done a lot with Gary V and community building, which is something I'm really interested in. But I think simply replying to comments and making people feel like part of something gets you that audience. So when we watch your live shows, there's the same names in there, there's the same people. And I have no idea who these people are, but I kind of feel like I belong to the same gang as them.
Yeah, you're part of the friend group. Like it is. That's genuinely the way that I set everything up from the first place. I started the channel as living on iPad as opposed to iCave Dave actually in the early days, because during lockdown, we were all sitting at home. None of us had anything to do. Like work shut down, still getting some money, but not all of it. I was like, I've got this spare time. Like my bartending podcast that I did before this, Bartender HQ, I decided at the beginning of lockdown, right, I'm going to do a breakfast show for bartenders, like as a daily thing. So we were doing that, and I did it for a couple of weeks. It just got no traction. I was basically recording it in the morning, trying to talk about bartending type things, but no bartenders are at work. So there's a limit to how much can happen. Like drinks companies are not really bringing new things. So yeah, that fizzled, and I was like, okay, I'm bored. I've got an iPad. Let's see how much of what I normally do on the Mac I can do on the iPad. Living on iPad, that's what we're going to do. Played Call of Duty on there because it's actually really good. Call of Duty Mobile on the iPad, and it was like a 9th gen at the time, so it wasn't even the latest one. Did a few of those bits, and then we were hearing Apple Silicon is coming. Apple's going to start using these iPad processors in Macs, and I was like, well, that's a window in for me to start talking about Mac. And then after WWDC, we decided to make it daily, and it was just a case of like, right, I'm gonna look at the Apple News. There's dozens of Apple News websites out there that do this as their full-time thing. That's all they do. If I can't find 3 stories a day to talk about on a video, then I don't know what these websites are doing. So that's what we did. And then when it got quiet, I gave answers. Right, ask me your questions. Let's address what you want to know about Apple. And yeah, the community side, because I was still at that point moderating Gary V's First in Line group on Facebook, it just made a lot of sense to kind of pick up on that and make sure that community stuff. And it was actually Gary that said to me, when you're doing this celebration thing, do the long live stream, like 6-12 hours, which we did for iCaversary for the first anniversary, and it was great. That was when we talked to John and Luke Miani and Brian Tong we had on it, and all sorts of other like smaller YouTubers from like the UK and the Philippines and various different places. It was amazing. And some of those YouTubers have already dropped off now, and obviously we kind of dipped a little bit when actual real life came back, but I'm trying really hard to get some more videos out. The time that we're recording this, we've got a video that's gone live today. We had one the previous day. I'm going to try and get the 5 out this week, including this on the Friday. So yeah, fingers crossed we're gonna get back, climb back up, and make this real again. So yeah,
it's a really engaging channel. I think maybe because you've got a British accent and there's some familiarity there, whereas you're watching Luke Miani or Dave 2D or Lou Later, to any of these people, because there's that accent and because they are living in a different world. They talk about just nipping over to San Francisco or nip over to Cupertino. Like, we can't do that. It costs me enough just to get into London, and I'm only half an hour away. To go to the Battersea store, that's like a day out of my life, and we've got a lot of other things going on. I do think that the society over on that side of the pond is different. So there's engagement here. I'm like, there's a guy with an accent that's familiar that's talking about stuff that I'm into. Cool.
Yeah. No, it's really good fun, and I do like the fact that we are a little bit different from those other channels, and like I try to pick up on as many of the stories as possible. Like I find that people on this channel not that interested in iPhones, which is really weird because every other channel's like, yeah, if I talk about iPhone, then everyone watches, and if I talk about Macs, then I get like 20 views or something. Like I'm the exact opposite. Like our biggest videos ever have been talking about like chip performance and like benchmarks and what will be the next version of Apple Silicon be. It's been great fun. But yeah, I think this Qualcomm stuff, just remembering that we were actually talking about a topic before we went off on a huge tangent, which I like. I enjoy the tangents. The Qualcomm stuff that's going on at the minute, like I did have to giggle a little bit, and the video that came out earlier this week about Qualcomm and about the M4 that I was talking about as well, they're comparing this Qualcomm to the M3. It's 20% faster in multi-core. It's 28%, like the M3 is 28% faster in single core, which is what makes it feel snappy. Like, unless you're rendering out massive video files, then you're going to see, like, maybe it's a minute quicker or something like that. But I think we're also, because it's not coming out until June time, something like that, it's not actually going to be available in a device. And currently, the SQ3, I think it's called, that Microsoft has, their current version of this Snapdragon, like, that's literally half the power of the M3, and it starts at like $1,400-1,500. So it's like, it's nowhere close on price or efficiency, and then you also have to buy the keyboard separately on those ones. So yeah. I don't think it's really going to compete as much as people think.
Yeah, but even on these, you talk about benchmarks. Now, I do watch a lot of Max Tech. I really enjoy Max and Vadim and their take on things. But when they get into like heavy numbers, I just keep thinking, at this stage where we're at with technology at the moment, so what? What? Yeah. And it doesn't make a difference to most people's lives. The same as people moan about 8 gig of unified memory on like my other half's got a MacBook Air, same as one you run on, and I love using it. I sometimes prefer using it on my lap to my 14-inch because it's light and it's snappy. I can edit video on that without really. I wouldn't stick like 8 streams of 8K on there because that's not what it's for. But I can knock together a little 4K video.
Oh, you're kidding? So the MacBook Air is not for rendering out a Pixar movie? Like, somebody tell Max Tech. Like, it seems like every time they get the base model, I'm surprised, like, iPhone SE comes out, oh, it thermal throttles when you're trying to do 8 streams of 8K. Like, who knew? Like,
I've got 90 Chrome tabs and I'm trying to play Call of Duty and it's throttling and getting too hot. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, scandal. I don't understand this. Like, we never in the past. The problem that Apple has got is they made the MacBook Air too good. Because we would never have even considered like reviewing a MacBook Air as a device for video editing, let alone, transcoding and like heavy photo work and all of the stuff that it's being asked to do now. Like, that Apple is even sort of saying it's the best consumer laptop for AI now, like because of the neural engines and things like that. And it probably is, but most people aren't doing AI even on device yet. Whereas Apple is, and it looks like we're going to be seeing a lot more AI stuff coming at WWDC this year, which is going to be exciting.
And they're calling it AI, not machine learning.
I know, they've actually kind of called it consumer AI in some of their stuff, and I'm surprised about that. But I don't know if it's just because they're trying to appeal to a more kind of broad market with that MacBook Air, and that's what people already call it. I'm interested to see what Apple bills it as at WWDC, because I don't think they're going to say Siri AI or something along those lines, in the same way that we didn't get mixed reality, augmented reality, we got spatial computing. Yeah, I think they're going to have their own name for it, which will then move over to a lot of other kind of brands will start using that term. But yeah, like, all in on AI, it seems, with the next versions of not only macOS but iOS and probably iPadOS, although maybe a year later, because that's normally the way it happens with the iPad.
iPadOS, it's a bane of my life. So I broadly agree with you, Dave, that the iPad needs to be the iPad. Make the iPad again. I don't want to, do my entire life on an iPad. I love my iPad Pro. I don't use it as much as I would, because I either do things on my phone, because the phone is so capable.
Yep, and always in your pocket.
Yeah. Or I get my laptop out and do things on the MacBook, because I can sit there on the sofa all night without worrying about battery. I can edit video for hours and I never look at the battery indicator. It's so good. So where does the iPad fall into that? It's a very expensive content consuming device. It's an £1,100 iPad Pro. I did go through a phase of my short customer facing videos for the Academy. I would just put the iPad on a stand, record, and then edit through LumaFusion on my iPad. That's quite a nice thing to sit there with the Apple Pencil and do. But I find myself now do it on the phone, airdrop it to the laptop, and it's done quicker. So I don't know where the iPad fits into my life. I don't just want it to be a YouTube machine, because it's way too expensive for that. So I'm like, what's it for? And that's the iPad Pro. I think my next one's probably going to be an iPad Air with an M chip in it, and that does everything I need it to do.
Yeah, I think for the people that do want to have kind of a one device to rule them all, I think the iPad Pro is probably a decent option. And if you've got the budget and you just want a really good content consumption device, the next one that's going to have these OLED displays and things is going to be probably the prettiest way that you can watch stuff, because those OLEDs are going to look better than the MacBook Pro displays at that point, presumably. Obviously, at the minute, they've got the mini LED, which isn't quite as good as the MacBook Pro mini LED, but it is better in terms of like the areas, like the dimming zones, than the $5,000 Pro Display XDR, which has got like an embarrassingly small number of dimming zones, in all honesty. I think it's something like, is it 512 or something like that? And then there's 2,500 on the iPads and the MacBook Pros, something like that. I can't quite remember, but yeah, it's not the best, and yet we're still sitting here looking at it. Do you think that there is a place for Apple's own displays, given the price point that they're trying to put out at the moment? And like, basically the 5K iMac display has become the studio display, and it hasn't really dropped in price that much.
Well, I'm one of these guys who desires the best thing, and so they're targeting that at me. Whether I need it or not, I want it. So I've got the MacBook Pro, I've got the iPhone 15 Pro. These are the things that I desired. I've got the iPhone 15 Pro and the iPad Pro with the M1 in. That was what I wanted to get. I was very excited about the studio display, and then I looked at the specs and was like, it's not worth the money. It's not. So I've actually got a BenQ studio monitor here, which is factory calibrated, and it was like 300 quid, 27 inch BenQ monitor. It's brilliant. Comes with a calibration certificate out of the box. And I have no issues with it, and it's 1440 because that scales nicely with macOS, and it's a really lovely monitor, and it's a quarter of the price of the studio display, which is lovely and looks really nice and would look beautiful on my desk, but isn't the best monitor for the money. So I don't know. I think there's a market for it, but I think Apple will need to like put some other bells and whistles on it to make it appealing.
Explain the whys. Like, we heard all of this noise about it being powered by an A13 inside, which basically just looks after the camera and allows it to do things like not continuity camera, but the center stage and that kind of thing, and adding the background blurs and things. But surely the Mac that's attached to it could be just running that. That doesn't seem like it needs the A13 inside it. It doesn't feel like that's doing anything. Like, at least give it the option of being an Apple TV when it's switched off, like when it's not connected to a Mac. Like, give it that option. I don't know. That just seems like a bit of a waste of time to me. But yeah, with the AI stuff that's potentially going to be coming, like, have you been using AI? Have you been using any generative stuff in your work? Have you been getting it to write your videos for you? Have you recreated your own voice yet?
Yeah, I'm a tinkerer, so I love the gadgets, and I love that sort of things. I have, and this is going to upset graphic designers everywhere, I'm not a very good designer. You know, I have all of this creative stuff. I am a physical person, so I do a lot of running and jumping and playing and choreography, and I'm creative in that way. I work in theatre, I work in film, but I can't sit down and draw something. So for my academy, I've been using AI-generated images. I asked AI to create me a picture of an Easter bunny doing parkour for our Easter holiday camps. and it came up with this great little Easter Bunny picture, and then it said, would you like Easter eggs in the background? Like, yeah, absolutely, definitely. So I think that was through Copilot, the Microsoft one.
Okay.
I've done quite a lot of professional photography. Again, from a creative side of things, I can do images and I can edit images, but I'm not a sketch artist. That's not really where my talents lie. So I've used some generative fill. I do worry about this is not the dystopia we signed up for. We were supposed to be living in a world where AI did all of the trash collecting and washing up and did all of our taxes for us, so we could go and create and do art. Whereas we're living in a world now where the AI is doing all the art and we're doing the rest of the stuff.
We're picking up after it.
Yeah. So I am a little bit worried about the creative fields, and I think it's always going to lack that human touch. I think, at the moment it can't get fingers or faces right. But I think there's always going to be an element of, I can ask AI to make me a funny little cartoon image, or I can make, and graphic designers are going to lose out on that, and logo design. Again, it's disappointing that logo design can be done so easily through AI. But I think when it comes to creating big stuff other than stock footage, the video that they can create now is very, very appealing from a stock footage point of view. I still think we're a very long way off the fear, which was you can get a movie and I could be like, right, I want to watch Top Gun Maverick, but I want iCave Dave to be Maverick. Go. That's a possibility in not many years. But where does the appeal die after a little while?
I mean, I know a lot of people have been saying, movies are going to become more like video games where you kind of become a part of the action, that kind of thing. And I feel like there is going to be a future for that sort of thing with the immersive video that we're going to be getting with things like Vision Pro. But in order to get to the point where you can kind of be within a scene and look around it, that whole scene has to be digital, because otherwise you're going to look around and you're going to see the director and you're going to see cameramen and people like that, which is not going to kind of immerse you in the same way. But I think there are going to be there's computer games already like that, which are kind of quite cinematic, and Unreal Engine is being used for things like the Star Wars TV shows with those volumes that people are going into. So basically the environment is being generated in real time, but they can remove background props just with a click of a button and all that kind of thing. I think that will probably be the next step. That's probably what is going to move into this kind of VR situation a little bit more soon. So there will be kind of 3D environmental movies that you can kind of sit and look around in your own time in. But without being a character, if that makes sense. So I think that's probably where we'll end up going. So you can kind of recreate a movie scene and then move around it to see it from whatever angle you want. That would be really cool for, I don't know, like a CSI kind of game. Yeah. Where you can actually move around, you can see what's happened from different angles, you can look for clues. That would be quite cool.
Or, I don't know, a fully immersive Monkey Island game would be amazing.
Monkey Island. Now we are going fully retro now. I remember installing that from floppy disks. I think it was like 4 or 5 floppy disks.
Yeah.
Curse of Monkey Island. That was a fantastic game. There have been some remakes, I think.
I think it's on iOS, or possibly iPadOS. I don't quote me on that. Let us know in the comments.
There you go. Yeah, Guybrush Threepwood.
And the Curse of LeChuck.
Yeah, makes his triumphant return. No, but that sort of thing would be great. And I could actually see AI being used to resurrect old games and upscale and that kind of stuff. That's a really good use of it. But also keeping the character of those games. But that's where it's going to be difficult, because it's having to interpret from the 8 pixels that was a character and try and make that into a vaguely realistic or smoother looking character.
I mean, I hope that AI will actually prompt creativity again, because you're looking at cinema and you're looking at the creative fields at the moment. There's a lot of stagnation. There's a lot of studios playing it really safe, like, let's just make a remake of this, let's reboot this, because movies cost so much money to make. They need so many people in there to make their box office money back. When you've got a $300 million movie that needs $1 billion at the box office just to break even after everything costs as much as it does, studios are we've got the bean counters getting involved in the creative process, which arguably doesn't make for the best creative thing. I really hope that as they start to mess around with AI, it's going to go horribly wrong. Going to start, the bean counter saying we're going to AI generate this person or this background, and movies are going to lose some of that magic, and perhaps we'll go back to the likes of, I don't know, Kevin Smith making Clerks and the original Rocky movies and Rambo. And I mean, I'm not saying they're the best movies ever made. I had to say that a lot, but they were independent films, or a man who had an idea, went into a studio and said, can we make this? And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll give you like $10 million to go make us this little film. And I think we'll see a resurgence in actual creativity, but it's going to have to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, $10 and $20 million films coming back. I mean, that is, as much as it sounds like a ridiculous amount of money, it's a tiny amount of money when you think of the amount of people that you need there and the equipment and that sort of thing. But I do think independent film has a really good place, and I think YouTube has been a huge boon for it. The fact that we don't get gate-kept in the way that we did in the past, where if you really want to go out and make something on a shoestring, you've got a decent camera in your pocket, you already own it. You've got access to lenses that you can clip onto a phone quite easily. We saw Apple themselves filming the Scary Fast event on iPhone, using Blackmagic's app, which is free, using obviously rigs around it. I don't know if you saw Brian Tong's video where he did a tour of Apple campus on the back of a golf buggy, and he had like 4 different iPhones set up with different rigs around them. Awesome. And filmed the whole thing on iPhones. It's incredible how good it looks. It really opens things up to people. Like my kids, I have a 7-year-old who is making little movies with his cousin, like on their iPads, like filming it on a crappy camera on an iPad, and then going into iMovie and editing movies when he's 7. Yep. Like, it's opened it up to so many people. They already want a YouTube channel. They're not having one just yet, but we're working on it. And like, once they've edited some stuff, if they want me to upload it to a little YouTube channel, once I've had a look at it, fine. It's not a problem. They can do that. And I think it's just the accessibility of it. When I was a kid, we didn't even have a video camera, like, as a family. Like, that's not a thing that we had. We could VHS record stuff off the TV, but you had to be there, and then you got a timer on it, and that was exciting. And then, we sent off films to be developed for your photos on your holiday, and you ended up with your 40 or 50 pictures of a holiday, like, of 3 weeks. And now we take that in a morning of our breakfast.
Yep.
It's it's kind of ridiculous how much content is being captured now.
Yeah, but the fact that everyone can do it means that more people are doing it, and that means there's more creators out there. And I guess that kind of dilutes the market a little bit, so it's a bit harder to get noticed, but it does mean that the barrier to entry is very low.
Mm-hmm. It dilutes the market, but it also means that we can be more niche than we were in the past. Like, in the past, you would have on TV Tomorrow's World, which you mentioned in a question just recently on the channel. Tomorrow's World used to be where you got all of your technology news from, and it was everything happening in the world in 45 minutes or half an hour a week.
Yeah. And
now we have niche little channels like mine, where I pull apart an old Mac and put in a display from an iPad and an M1 Mac Mini, and then some people like watching that, and that's great. Or you've got other channels where people are talking purely about the numbers behind, like, how powerful chips are comparatively, and how warm do they get, and what's the kind of RAM that's attached. Like, we would never have had this level of information. Like, the world always gets more niche, and everyone specialises more. There's a time, if you go far enough back, where we had to build our own houses, farm our own food, grow our own crops, hunt our own meat. And if you look back at those times, all of those things were a bit rubbish. And then and then we worked out that if you get the people that are good at building houses to build houses, and the people that are good at farming to farm, and you can just swap between you, then everyone gets better things. And, like, we're just continuing that. Like, you had Newton discovered so many things about physics and the world, the natural world. And now you get scientists who are looking at the very, very tiny... They'll spend their entire career looking at one subatomic particle, because we're standing on the shoulders of the stuff that's happened before, so we can look in more detail at things now. And it's a good thing. It's all a good thing. AI will take people's jobs. but there will be other jobs. There will be different jobs that happen. You know, when self-driving vehicles do occur, some people who drive for a living won't have that job anymore. There will be other things to do. And yes, it takes time for people to retrain and things, but it's not a bad thing. Like, progress is actually okay.
Yeah, and on that, you know, I think it depends on the people that are using it, really. And I think AI has the potential to improve the human race. But we live in a world at the moment where, I don't want to dive into politics, but we live in a world at the moment where there are a small number of people that have a huge amount of money and a lot of people that don't have a huge amount of money. And if the people that have huge amounts of money and desire to get more money are in charge of these things, then it might not be used for the good of humanity, but the good of someone's pocket. So we're looking at like video game developers. Arguably, video games have peaked. The golden age is gone because now it's all about microtransactions and DLC and how they can squeeze every last penny out of them. Movies are arguably not as good as they were a few years ago because they're looking at how they can monetize it better, how they can get bums on seats, how they can tick a lot of boxes.
What merch can we make from this?
Exactly. So when we've got self-driving cars, it should be that, you know, my friend, the taxi driver, now has 3 self-driving cars and he's, you know, can expand his business. Well, actually, you're probably looking at Uber just making all of their people redundant because they don't need drivers anymore. And those people are out of work, but Uber are making more money. So I think it's how it's used. And I think we need to be very careful on that to make sure that technology is used for the good of humanity and not the good of a very small group of people. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it. We can just, you know, let our wallets do the talking. If we don't like something, don't buy it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it also, I think this week, Elon Musk has announced that the robo-taxi, the Tesla robo-taxi, is coming on the 8th of the 8th, so August. Not sure which year, because based on his typical timelines, I mean, maybe it's being announced that day and being released in 2035 or something like that. I don't know. But it always confuses me, and this is something that I see with like people with online courses and things like that as well, and all of those like trading adverts that you get before and after my videos, I assume, because you're all very into your trading. I'm releasing my my system for how you can make all of this money because I've been so successful and I want to... No, because if you're that successful, you're just going to do it yourself. And the same with Tesla. If these robo-taxis are going to be as profitable as you think, they were saying, oh, we're going to sell these cars, they're going to have the robo-taxi software built in, and you can buy the car and you can put it on the road and it'll earn you money. If that's the case, Tesla will just make the cars and put them on the road. They won't sell them to you to do it. It's very much like when you go out and buy a timeshare. Oh, you can sell this time to your friends and then you'll make money. No, because that's just how a hotel works. If it was going to work, they would have done it. They wouldn't sell you the room in the first place to sell on. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be as bad as everyone thinks in those terms. I would love for cars to drive themselves, because when we get to the point where cars can drive themselves, it's going to be a lot safer, because if they're all driving themselves, no one's making silly mistakes. Like, it will be a good thing.
We get that ethical conundrum, don't we? Like, as a human being, if you're driving towards a junction and 2 people run out on the road, there's an old lady and a young boy, which one do you hit if you're hitting? You know, we've got the trolley problem, and how do we get AI to make that decision for us, and how does it make that decision? I think it's a very, very narrow niche case, but I think when you're letting the machine learning make its own decisions, who tells it what to decide?
Yeah, and obviously there's always going to be those edge cases, and they are edge cases. But the chances are, when you've got AI and machine learning, it doesn't have a reaction time to speak of in the way that we do.
No.
The chances are it will probably be able to avoid a serious accident of any kind in most cases. Like, there will always be the edge cases, but we will probably mitigate against that by having weird sirens going off on them, or some sort of, maybe it's even very personalized. They've got cones of sound, so just the people that are getting near it can hear them and all that sort of stuff. There's going to be
I'm
ways.
glad you clarified on that, because when you said very personal, I was thinking you were like, I can program. I don't like old ladies, or so that's who it's going to run over. Like,
no, I meant that to begin with, but then I sort of swerved off to protect the elderly.
Yeah. No, the self-driving cars are an interesting one. And electric cars in general. So you've alluded to the fact that you're looking at like an EV for your next car. I think I'm kind of swaying towards it. I think my next vehicle, I quite like the Golf, the GTE. So it's a hybrid, plug-in hybrid. I think I'm ready for a plug-in hybrid, but I'm not ready for a full EV yet. I don't think the infrastructure, particularly in this area, is quite there. I can charge it at home, I could charge it at work, but I do occasionally do longer journeys, and that's what concerns me.
I know pretty much all of the motorway services have EV charging. Yes, it's not quite as quick, but most of the EVs now are arriving, and they've got in the region of 250-ish miles, ballpark. And I know on cold days it's not going to be that much, but I drive pretty much most of my day working, because I drive between different customers. I'm in field sales. I'm out and about all day. I don't remember the last time, even when I was doing the sort of most driving that I do in a day's work, where it would have gone over 150 miles, and certainly not more than 150 miles without stopping, without wanting some lunch or to go for a wee, or any of those things. I don't think it's the problem that people expect it is. I like the idea of getting up every morning and having essentially a full tank and not having to go to a petrol station on my way. It might make me eat more healthily, and dear God, I know I need help with that. Not having that temptation of just popping into the petrol station and grabbing a sandwich or all of the crap that you get from there. I feel like we're at the tipping point now where we can, and I know it's not entirely convenient yet. I know it's not perfect, but people have to do it for it to become that. It's the same issue I think that we have with Macs, bringing it full circle back to Apple, with gaming. Like, if people don't start buying the games that exist on Mac OS, developers won't see that there's a demand for games on Mac OS, and therefore won't develop games for Mac OS. If there are games on Mac OS and people start downloading them and using them, then the developers will see there is a demand for games on Mac OS, and the power is there now with Apple Silicon, so much more than it used to be with the Intel ones, which were pretty much handicapped by the graphics cards in them more than anything else. But again, the adoption rate is much higher on Apple Silicon because of the efficiency and because of the incredible battery life and because of how much more pleasant just Mac OS is to use. Like, Windows is unfriendly.
Oh, and the amount of bloatware you get in Windows now. I don't want to open my taskbar and immediately see all of the awful news in the world. If I want to go read the news, I'll go read the news. I don't want. I know you can move the widgets and you can add them and remove them, but the fact that they're there as default, and a lot of people won't know how to do that. You think we're techie people, so we'll set up our machines how we want, but you get like, my nan gets a machine and all she gets is all of the woes of the world every time she clicks on the start menu, or adverts for software she doesn't have installed that is telling her she needs to, and then signing up for subscriptions without wanting to, which is what they're trying to do.
Yeah, of course. When
you come with the modern day demo of whether it be Office or of antivirus or whatever it happens to be, the choice isn't really there anymore.
I'm really glad that we don't have as much pressure for antivirus and things like that on the Mac. Obviously, it's not 100% secure. Nothing's 100% secure, and we have seen these vulnerabilities that are kind of built into the Apple Silicon chips very recently. I don't think they're super critical from what I've read. I could be wrong. I've not actually spent enough time looking into it, but it's also a case of it's there now. Not a lot we can do about it. So,
I'm raw dogging the internet right now. There is nothing other than the stock firewall on mine. If you want to hack me, come at me, bros. Come at me. I'm not going to click your dodgy links. I hope.
Exactly. Yeah. But it happens. There's always going to be ways, and it's always like a cat and mouse game. But yeah, I think we're in a good place with the Mac. Like, I don't think it's been as solid as it is now for a very long time. I don't think it's been as appealing for people as it is now for a very long time. And I just see people picking them up. I see more and more Macs out and about. I don't know if it's just that people with Macs like to get them out in a coffee shop just because it looks nicer, or I don't know. Like I just see so much of it, and I don't know if it's the same way you are.
I kind of think that the more online services we have, like we're recording this in a browser, so we've both got browsers open, and this is an online service. Your email is an online service. Most of the things that you do are going to be done in a browser window. Therefore, the operating system we use matters less. You know, if we're doing heavy creative work, yeah, you want a decent file management system and that, but most of the things that normies do is going to exist in a browser these days. So it doesn't really matter which operating system you've got going on, which side the close button is.
Yeah. And I do think that is what is going to allow Apple to come with a more budget version of the laptop with macOS. Like the A17 Pro that we've got in the current iPhone Pros is basically as powerful in multi-core as the M1 at this point. Like, it's caught up. That's how long it takes. It's about 3-4 years. Why can't we have a budget laptop that maybe just doesn't run Final Cut and Logic and those kind of apps, but can run iMovie, can run GarageBand, can run all of the kind of basic stuff, Pages, Numbers, Keynote, all of the stuff that most people will use, good browsers, that would be absolutely fine. And just maybe put things like Final Cut Pro as an M-chip exclusive, which they've already done on iPad, so they're not afraid to do that.
But you guarantee that when they do release that low-cost, MacBook for everyone, Max and Vadim are still going to get it and tell you how bad it is at rendering 8K video.
Exactly. And that's the issue. I think we need to, just like with the iPad, let the iPad be an iPad. Let the iPad Air be an iPad Air. Let the MacBook Air be a MacBook Air, and let things do what they're supposed to do, as opposed to complaining that they can't quite do the things they're not supposed to do as well as a Mac Pro.
Do we have the budget MacBook Air over here? Because I know that Walmart have got it, or is it Best Buy have got it in the States?
$699.
Yeah. Where do we go over here?
Guess. I mean, I'm going to check right now.
I'd have thought it would have been maybe
Amazon.
an Asda. Oh, Amazon, okay.
I bet Amazon has got an M1 MacBook Air for a similar price. But let's check in real time.
Because that is a really compelling argument. When people say to me, like friends that know I'm into tech, would be like, well, what should I get? I'm like, MacBook Air, every time. If you can afford it, that's the only one I recommend. If you can't afford it, then look for a refurbished or a second-hand one. Speaking of which, the Apple refurb store is really bare at the moment. I was looking for a refurbished Mac that I might use on reception at work. Nothing. Like, it was so empty.
Wow. So I will just say here, $749.
Okay.
UK price for an M1 MacBook Air. And that is, it's the lower end version. So it's got the 7-core GPU. But if you want to go renewed for the same device, £617.
Ooh. That's still a good range laptop. A good mid-range
tasty.
Laptop, yeah.
So, you can definitely pick them up very reasonably. I don't know how much would an M1 Mac Mini be these days.
So that's what I was looking for our reception at work. So I thought an M1 Mac Mini with like a little 24-inch monitor, keyboard and mouse, that'll last for years for just doing some browser work.
So just for a renewed one on Amazon would be $470, which does not seem like good value when you think that it's $599 for an M2.
Yeah, they haven't depreciated that much, and I think that's kind of what I was looking at. And then your brain goes, well, I might as well get a new one, but I didn't want to spend £500. I wanted to spend £400, but I don't want to spend £400 on that because it's not much worse than And
I would say these are refurbs. If you were to get a Mac Mini from eBay with an M1 inside, is it going to be any worse? Is there anything you can really break on a Mac Mini? Probably not. Unless you've dunked it in the bath or something, in which case, you've got consumer protections on eBay too. But I would guess you could probably get one for about $350, $400.
Oh, I made the mistake of looking on Facebook sales, which is the worst place to try and communicate with people selling things. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
It's horrific.
And selling things on there. So I sold my iPhone 12 Pro Max on Facebook sales, and I didn't really know how much it was worth. I had a look on eBay and had a look on what these things were worth. Now, very long story short, I dropped my 12 Pro Max and it broke. I dropped it face down on a tile floor, and I picked it up and thought, the glass is intact. Excellent. I got away with it. No, modem was broken. Didn't work. Just stopped working.
Modem?
Yeah.
Wow.
Apparently it did happen. It wasn't uncommon for these things, but it went face down on the tile floor. Not a crack or a dent on it. Brilliant. But it just didn't work. It wouldn't connect to Wi-Fi. It wouldn't connect to data. It just wouldn't work at all.
I wonder if the aerial connector had just popped off on the inside. Because they're little round... Yeah.
But it was insured. So I had a care package on it. So I got a new one next day, delivered, fine. Brand new. Or it wasn't. It was a refurbed with like 90% battery health. So I then sold that because I just bought the 15 Pro. So I didn't need it. It was going to get sold anyway. It was just bad timing. So this thing was like boxed and had plastic on it, and it was lovely. And I advertised it for like £250. I had someone at my door with cash within half an hour. Like, I've underpriced this. I have massively underpriced this.
Yeah. So was that a 12 Pro Max?
12 Pro Max, with 256 gig.
If that was when the 15 Pro had just come out, I would say that was you probably could have got 600 to 700 for that.
Oh, ouch. No wonder the guy was there in the shot. Yeah. Oh, well, you know.
Yeah.
But I'd had 3 years use out of it. I'd had 3 years use out of the phone. I didn't go on a contract. I've bought this one outright because I think I'm probably going to do more regular updates. So I'll probably buy the next one, then sell this to offset the cost of it. Yeah,
I think that's what I'm going to move to this year because I have slightly less other costs going out now, which is good. So yeah, that's my plan. So moving off of the contracts and moving on to outright purchases is probably what I'll do, because I think you could probably have the latest iPhone Pro for about 200 quid a year.
Yeah,
I reckon that's sort of what depreciation you'll be looking at. I would say if you want to plan to do that, I would put a screen protector on it and keep it in a case so that it's as new as possible.
Oh, I'm going to quote you on that, Dave. Mr. Dave, I like naked phones.
Yeah, so I've actually been using a case on my iPhone 14 Pro since day one, pretty much. Picata sent me over Pitaka, I think. Sent me one of their Aramid fiber woven cases, and my goodness, it's good. It's so light. I think it weighs about 8 grams. It adds almost no bulk to the phone at all, and it's really protected it well, even though I basically ruined the screen within a couple of days by keeping it in the same pocket naked as my 12 Pro Max at the time.
Ooh, okay.
And so it's got all of the little circles on the display that scratched in from the cameras. That was a poor choice. But yeah, the only screen protectors I like is the thin plastic matte ones. I kind of like the matte feel on the displays rather than the glossy. That's my thing.
I do have a screen protector, and I've got a very thin silicon case because I do like the size of the Pro. I don't know that I'll jump on Pro Max again unless there's something different about it. I quite like having a slightly smaller phone. I was worried the battery life wouldn't be as good, but it's fine. I mean, the battery life on the 15 Pro is great. I don't have to charge it every night. In fact, I don't most of the time. It's plugged in my car when I drive to and from work, and I just leave it on the table next to my bed.
Yeah, I may be tempted by a Pro Max, depending on what the cameras are like, because obviously the camera is the most important thing for me because I use it for every video on this channel. So we will see. I didn't want
5x zoom. I didn't want the 5x zoom because I very rarely use that zoom range. So I'm generally either 1x or a 2x. So I don't really use the 3x very much on my 15 Pro, and I had no need for the 5x. And I was more concerned that go to 5x and zoom out a little bit and suddenly using the other sensor that's cropped to within an inch of its life, at 4.8 or 4.9. So because it's not a zoom range I use, it wasn't a big deal for me.
Makes sense. Right. I think we're going to wrap this one up, my friend. Can you tell everyone where they can find you on the internet and maybe even in real life if you want people to come to your classes?
Yeah, so we didn't really talk about the stuff that I do. So BradWendesPod.com. There's a lot of information on there. Some of my writings, which I was writing for F-Stoppers on tech and cameras and photography. So BradWendesPod.com. There's also links to my podcast, or just look at me. I'm the only Brad Wendes in the world, according to the census. So Wendes. I've done Britain's Got Talent, Ninja Warrior UK. I work in theatre and work in film. I kind of do lots of random creative stuff. But yeah, check me out on Instagram's probably my drug of choice. So Brad Wendes on Instagram, and have a look at some of the stuff I'm doing.
And we're about to record a podcast for your podcast as well. So we're going to swap places. We're going to swap chairs, which is a bit of a commute, annoyingly.
Yeah.
So I will pop a link in the show notes to this for your podcast as well. And then people can come and hang out with us for another hour or so.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed this.
Perfect. Thanks for being here, mate.
A complete revolution. We figured out a way we machine all of the surfaces to create something that's genuinely new. You have to start again. Unapologetically plastic. Aluminium.